Welcome to another English 101 video. I'm so glad you're here because we've got some important things to talk about before you submit the final draft of your rhetorical analysis paper. There's going to be some discussion about editing this week too, but we've got to make sure you understand the purpose of the paper. We've got to make sure you understand what analytical writing is. Otherwise, even if the paper is really nicely edited, it's not going to pass. So let's talk quickly about that. There was an example of some analytical writing that you just looked at. Here it is. Now, this is from the sample paper. Now, of course, this is about a different article. This is not one of the three articles that you were given to choose from. But it is another article in that same New York Times series, and it is still very much about problems in football. It's just not one of the ones you can choose. This is a paper that a student wrote for me a while back when I used to let people choose Buckman's article. And so it does all of the things that you're supposed to do in your paper. The sample paper can be found under modules, and then look for the rhetorical analysis toolbox. Anyhow, so let's kind of dissect this body paragraph, and in doing so, we're going to demonstrate what sound analytical writing is, because one of the reasons that this is an A paragraph is because, and that it's an A paper, the whole paper, is because there's some very good use of analytical writing. And to achieve that, he followed the directions, the assignment instructions for the rhetorical analysis paper very closely. I would encourage you to do the same. But let's go ahead and talk about the answers here, because I'm sure you've already read the paragraph. Underline where the student identifies specific lines from the article that appeal to logos. Well, you can tell where he identifies those lines because he's using quotation marks. He or she is using direct quotes from the article. And indeed, you're going to need to use direct quotes from the article to talk about the rhetorical appeals that are used. Lots of you did a good job of practicing that in the discussion board. You're just kind of expanding on that. And of course, you have to do it with all three of the rhetorical appeals, because all three of those articles, Graham, Koch, Washington, they all use all three of the rhetorical appeals. Pathos is very prominent in Koch, but he does also use appeals to logos and appeals to ethos. Anyhow, so you will need to find multiple examples of the uses of each appeal, and you'll point to them using quotes. Okay, write explanation where the student explains why the passage is an appeal to logos, and then write effect where they describe the effect the passage is designed to have on the reader. This is a two-step process, right? And so look, this here is explanation, right? We'll make this green. He's explaining why this passage is an appeal to logos. Here he says, the key here, you see how he says this is used? That's how you know there he's talking about the effect. What effect did Buckman want this passage to have on his reader? Why did he put it there? What's his purpose? That's the really interesting part of analysis, and you have to create time and space to delve into those questions. Same thing here, right? Okay, so same thing here. We've got some more explanation here and here. Okay, he explains what the quote means, why it is an appeal to logos, and then he explains the effect of the quote, what it's for, what it is designed to do. Okay, you see how he used the word, he or she used the word audience here? Okay, that's a good sign. You want to see the word audience in your paper, because if you're going to do a rhetorical analysis, you want to think about the effects of the different rhetorical appeals, what effects the author has designed them to have on the audience. Same thing with the words logos, ethos, and pathos. You need to use those words so that the reader knows which rhetorical appeal you are writing about. And indeed, it's very obvious which rhetorical appeal this paragraph is about, because the student uses the word multiple times, and he he or she even includes that word here in the topic sentence, right? So that you know the whole paragraph is going to be about logos. Pretty smart approach. Why is Buckman's name included with the quotes from the article? That's called a parenthetical citation. This one is. Okay. Down here, we have Buckman's name in the same sentence as the quote. That's also a form of in-text citation. It's not parenthetical because there's no parentheses, but the effect is the same. You're going to want to read more about this in the citation module in Canvas if the readings about citation that you've already looked at weren't helpful enough to you. Proper citation takes practice, and you're going to get some practice with it in this paper. What you want to remember is that when you use a quote like this, you need to include the source's last name, if it is a named source, in the same sentence as the quote. You can do it with a parenthetical, right, which you place immediately after the quote, or you can embed the author's last name in the same sentence as the quote, as this student has done here. Okay, I think that's about all I have to say about this paragraph. Yes, I know there's an error here, right? That's the interesting thing about writing. It's pretty difficult to achieve perfection, but if you strive for perfection, you can come up with something that might not be perfect, but will still be pretty great. Okay, so this I wanted to offer to you so that you know what not to do. This is not from a student. I created this myself. I created it in about 30 seconds because it required very little thought whatsoever because it's not analytical writing. I'll write that in all caps here. And I will tell you, this is unfortunately a common error in this first paper. I went ahead and copied this part from the student above, right? Because a lot of students, they'll start out right, they'll point to the quote, right? And then instead of doing any analysis, they try to convince me of things using the quote because unfortunately, far, far too many students have done nothing but persuasive writing in 5-paragraph essays for their entire high school career. If that wasn't you, I'm glad. If that was you, I would encourage you to in this first paper, understand you're not convincing me of anything in this paper. You're not convincing your reader of things. You are analyzing things. You are explaining how the argument in the article that you chose works, whether that is Koch, Washington, or Graham. And in fact, compare the writing here to this. Okay, this is not persuasive. It's analytical. The student is explaining how some of the appeals to logos in that article work. This is persuasive. All the student did was pointed a quote, and then here I just use it to criticize the NFL. Okay. If you have writing like this in your paper, it's going to lose lots of points and it's just going to get struck through like that, right? Because it doesn't belong in a paper like this, right? And it's interesting because everything I wrote here is grammatically correct, which is nice, but it's not analytical writing, and so it's going to lose a lot of points. Another issue that you can see here is the use of I. There should not be any first-person writing in this paper whatsoever. It is designed to be for an academic audience. Academic readers do not expect to see first person. They want the emphasis to be on your ideas, not you personally, right? Likewise, avoid exclamation points. Avoid informal phrases like I mean, right? You don't want this in a paper that is designed for an academic reader. Lastly, I included this part because sometimes I will get students who try to approach this like a research paper. And they go and they find like 5 different sources about CTE and they tell me what all those sources said about CTE. Again, not analytical writing. Actually, had a student reach out to me and say, can I use more than 2 sources? And I said, well, no, here's why. And we had a really great conversation about that because the student asked about it ahead of time. And once I explained why, then she realized why it would be problematic to bring all those other sources in. So anyhow, yeah, lesson there is watch the videos and definitely too ask questions ahead of time if you can, or stop by office hours as well to visit me if you want to pop in and have a question. Virtual office hours, of course, I'm not on campus at all this semester, but anytime you go to the homepage, you will see a fabulous picture of my kitty and a link that will tell you when, that will get you into my virtual office hours and will tell you when they're offered. I think that is all I have. Again, the takeaway here is we're talking about what analytical writing looks like. This is what it looks like, not this, right? So take a look at your own paper too. Think about that as you continue to revise and edit it. And as I said, reach out to me if you have any questions. That's all I've got. Take care now.